Hello, I'm Lucille. I'm going to begin by making a public disclaimer on Annemarie's behalf, just to say that she is allowed to use the phrase pale, stale males because by her own admission she's married to one. Before we get started.
Cut that out of the film. We'll be heading for the divorce course.
So yes, I'm Lucille Howe. I'm a journalist usually. I write for Guardian, Daily Mail, and Cosmopolitan. And actually, some of that rung true to me in terms of very politically correct talk that you hear, which I hear in our offices every day. But just looking around to see that we're still populated by pale, stale females in our offices. So a lot of talk going on, not a lot of diversity. So I wanted to begin by asking you, why are we still talking about this? I feel like we've been talking about it for about 20 years.
I find it really strange because I first started working in London about 17 years ago. And I remember getting on the stage with the chair of the Commission for Racial Equality at the time, Lord Herman Ouseley. And I actually made a statement that I don't want to be standing up here in 20 years' time and saying the same things. And some of those individuals that were around 20 years ago, I won't name them because we're all of a similar age, are sitting in this room. And I think they probably have got a similar view. Yeah. That I think things have moved on since the 70s and over the last 20 years. But in certain areas, I still think that pocket of monoculture does really still exist.
And why do you think there's a problem in particular in media?
I'm not sure really, because when you think of the content that comes out of Channel 4, the BBC, most of the media organisations, it's at the cutting edge, it's diverse, it's different. And when you start to look at who actually commissions, who runs, who's at the top of the leadership of all of those organisations, with the exception of 2 media organisations, to my knowledge, everybody at the top is of a similar background and a similar makeup. I won't actually say that they're all male because they're not. But they are all from a similar type of background, really.
So give me an example of one of those industries, or the examples of the people who are leading the way forward in this. The 2 you talked about just then, the individuals that
Well, I suppose the 2 organisations in the media that I most admire are the Economist Group, and it is probably my favourite company, closely followed by Time Warner.
Okay.
And I think both of those organisations, Time Warner previously, their chairman stroke chief executive was a guy called Dick Parsons, who's now the chair of Citigroup. And he actually has done so much behind the scenes to further what happens within the industry from his personal perspective as well as professional. And I suppose more recently, The Economist, Andrew Rashbash, the chief executive, was appointed a couple of years ago. And I remember having a really interesting conversation with him. He never thought that he would get the top job, and he's a Jew. And he comes from a background where he has suffered quite a lot of disadvantage. And actually he's driving The Economist into a new era on diversity. They don't shout about it, they don't put banners about it. Quietly, behind the scenes, they're making a big difference. And obviously, I adore Channel 4 because it is at the cutting edge of content and interesting programmes. But I have to say that Economist and Time Warner are there.
And you're talking about this pool of diverse talent. For some of the people here, how can they access this pool?
I think what you have to do is start to step outside of your comfort zone. So one of the things that I find about the media that maybe doesn't exist in so many of the other sectors is that they tend not to step out of that environment because the nature of the jobs, the roles, the times mean that quite often you're sort of head down in production or editing. And I think that sometimes sort of prevents them being able to sort of step outside. And because of the hours that they work, they tend to marry each other. Yeah. And so it does stay quite insular. And I want to see some of the people from the media step outside their sector. And if I'm honest, you start looking across the BBC, you start looking at Channel 4, Time Warner, The Economist, IPC Media, they are beginning to step out into other arenas. And so I'm hoping that I will not be sat here in another 20 years. I'll probably be dead, actually, but anyway.
So what networking opportunities are there for stepping into different industries and culture that...
There are huge networks. I mean, I chair something called Diverse Leaders, which is a network of international professionals from all walks of life and all backgrounds. And somebody said, well, Annemarie, can't you focus down on your network? Well, if I focus down on my network, I would be doing and creating a little monoculture within my network. So my sort of aim is to connect people who wouldn't normally be connected. And that's what I see as part of my mission, really.
And you divide your time at the moment between a third of that time out. Look at my microphone, my strange hand. Sorry, it's the fur coat. You know, you're out and about there in different cultures. You work internationally, sourcing people for this network for a third of your time. Yes, and then a third of that time is being out there, hooking the people up. You found the talent, particularly in Africa, with the right, HR departments and companies, etc. And you have not long ago received an OBE, haven't you? And what kind of doors has that opened for you?
Well, if I'm quite honest with you, the year I got my OBE was probably the worst year in my working life. My organisation at the time was a black charity, and at the time there was lots of funding issues, and it sort of collapsed around me. And to have that happen when it's something that's quite close to your heart, and to be given an OBE, it was at the time just irrelevant. It meant nothing. And it's only over the last sort of year or so I've actually realised that people do value an OBE and that I need to value it, and you can't all be perfect, and I am far from perfect. So I have, over the last couple of years, enjoyed it. When I was first given it, I wouldn't even tell people I had it.
Really?
So, yeah.
And tell us about that occasion when you were given it. I understand you met an old friend or a couple of old friends at the Palace.
I suppose I did, because I have recruited for Clarence House and Buckingham Palace behind the scenes for quite a while. And it was finally nice to take my pale male and not so stale husband and his mother and father along to receive it with me. And actually, I think that was the first time my in-laws actually got a real understanding of what I do, because you can't really put it into words because you're dipping in and out of so many worlds. It makes it quite difficult to define. And so
did they witness you at gunpoint?
No, they didn't witness the time that I almost got shot, but that was my own fault, sort of running to get to a meeting. I was late and thinking that, oh, well, I'm only going to the Palace, so they all know who I am. But of course, nobody in security knew who I was, and that was quite funny. And I lived to tell the tale. But that would have been frontline news, wouldn't it? Royal security kills black woman.
And so tell us a little bit about doing your homework before you go on these international missions to source talent, that you have to do an amount of homework to make sure you're culturally informed before you go on these trips, don't you? So what kind of examples?
I think you have, I suppose you really do have to do your homework when you are in the headhunting recruitment business. And I fail to understand some of my friends in recruitment who don't care about people. Because as a recruiter, your entire business and your entire consciousness is about what you do with people. So if I'm going to actually source a set of particular individuals or talent, then I will ring around my network and get the lay of the land. And actually one of the people that I'd probably ring first is Fiona Bartels-Ellis from the British Council and get the lay of the land as to what's going on. So it does. There's a lot of research to what I do, and there's a lot of being able to sort of be almost a chameleon and fit in, which this is quite alien because I will get up and speak, but it's normally off the cuff and just a few sort of witty comments and then off.
Okay.
And so this is something I don't normally do, is sit up on stage and spout.
I'm going to unleash you to the audience
Oh
in a second.
goodness!
I just want you to mention, you talked about a good book that you recommended about the politics of this kind of work.
I suppose most people who really know me know what my favourite book is. And
Anyone?
Well, if you ask this gentleman here,
Okay.
he will tell you.
John? Perfect. You win.
Because most people think Machiavelli was a dark, evil man. And I think those people have not read The Prince. The Prince is probably one of the books that I take wherever I go. And if you look at most senior leaders, whether it's Dick Parsons, whether it's JF Kennedy, Obama, Tony Blair, they all use The Prince. And it's not evil. The word Machiavelli has been taken and used in a way. It's a set of guidance and advice to how to understand the politics, when to move and when not to move. And actually, if more of our politicians read that book, I think we'd have a better environment, really.
Okay, it's on my reading
That's
list.
my plug for The Prince.
You weren't getting commission. Okay, well, I'm being greedy here, taking all the questions, so I'd like to open it up to the audience. If anyone has anything they'd like to ask Annemarie. Yeah.